Hey guys, Corey Hutton at Free Play Arcade here. We're exploring Star Wars in the arcade, and this is part 1 of our 2-part Game of the Week special. First up, Atari Star Wars. Before Star Wars, in 1981, Atari released a vector game called Tempest, utilizing what it called color quadriscan technology. Tempest was successful both as a Golden Age classic and also at proving the viability and indeed the desirability for color vector games. So to take another quick step back, in a vector display, the image is composed of drawn lines rather than a grid of pixels as in raster graphics. Atari originally called this type of graphics XY graphics because every point of the image on the screen is defined by an XY coordinate. If you're having trouble picturing it, think about the ship in Atari's Asteroids. It's basically a triangle defined by a few points on the screen with lines connecting them. Each point has an XY coordinate and the game is told to draw a line between the points. That is, in a nutshell, how vector graphics work. And the amazing thing about vector graphics is that every part of the monitor that is not told to illuminate is left true black. And guess what a screen filled with true black looks like? Space. So with industry-leading color vector technology that was perfect for space-themed games, Atari told its developers to aimlessly develop some sort of space game while it went after the biggest space license in history, Star Wars. So Ed Rotberg at Atari, who had previously developed Battlezone, began working on a game called Warp Speed. Then, the miracle Atari was hoping for happened. In June 1982, the coolest American arcade company, Atari, inked a deal with the coolest movie production company on Earth, Lucasfilm. Atari immediately gave the unfinished Warp Speed code to Mike Halley, who developed previous Game of the Week Gravatar, and told him his deadline was December 1982. And despite the rush, the game turned out to be one of the best color vector arcade games ever. In fact, Star Wars the arcade game has routinely been credited with potentially saving the Atari arcade game studio during the video game crash. Unlike anything else of its day, the game features digitized samples from the actual voices of the movie, including Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker,
Red 5 standing by.
Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi,
Use the Force, Luke.
James Earl Jones as Darth Vader, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, the actual mechanized beeps of R2-D2, and the growls of Chewbacca. Atari released the game both as an upright or as a 25-inch Ampliphone-powered sit-down version. The controls for Atari Star Wars consist of a yoke control with 4 buttons, 2 trigger style and 2 in a position to be pressed by thumbs, each of which fired a laser position on the 4 leading edges of the X-Wings. Early Star Wars stand-ups and nearly all of the sit-downs featured the preferred and more expensive Ampliphone monitor. But as cost cuts hit all of Atari during the video game crash, Atari began installing factory Wells Gardner 6100 monitors, the same monitors used in Tempest, Gravatar, Space Duel, and Black Widow. Star Wars was an absolute marvel of arcade technology upon its release, and is still one of the most popular games at either free play location, where 35 years later, we worked tirelessly to keep the game in its original condition. Despite the ongoing video game crash, with the immediate and obvious success of the Star Wars arcade, Atari began immediate development of additional Star Wars arcades based on the original Star Wars sequels. So modern day logic would lead you to believe that the original Star Wars arcade would be followed by its direct sequel, Empire Strikes Back. But due to the release dates of the movie, and with the hope to capture the hype of the coming movie, Atari fast-tracked Return of the Jedi over Empire Strikes Back. So the actual release order of the arcade games goes Star Wars the Arcade, Return of the Jedi, and then Empire Strikes Back. And while Empire Strikes Back would be developed by the same team that developed the original Star Wars arcade, Return of the Jedi would be an entirely new team of whoever Atari could find to throw into the project. The result was something absolutely unique, extremely interesting, but was ultimately doomed to commercial failure. Sitting in a cabinet very similar to the iconic Major Havoc cabinet, for Return of the Jedi, Atari used technology comparable to what would become its System 1 technology to create vibrant, isometric raster graphics. That said, many gamers both at the time and now feel that the use of raster graphics was a downgrade from the vector graphics used in the original Star Wars arcade. Levels in Return of the Jedi are set during the Battle for Endor and the attempt to destroy the Death Star. The game is notorious for blending authentic sound effects from the movie with various lower quality sound effects and voices that only exist in the Return of the Jedi arcade game.
Here goes nothing. The security deflector shield will be deactivated when we have confirmation of your code transmission. Leave them to me.
Ultimately though, Return of the Jedi gets a bit of a raw deal. The graphics are fantastic, the dedicated cabinet is amazing, and it doesn't matter what anyone says, flying the Millennium Falcon through the reactor core is awesome. Return of the Jedi's failure was almost certainly due to being released at the height of the video game crash, when arcades were closing by the hundreds and those that survived were not spending money on expensive new licensed arcade games. More than 30 years later, the events of 1984 have caused Return of the Jedi to become extremely rare. Given this rarity, there are very few public arcades that feature a Return of the Jedi, and we're extremely proud that we can feature it at Free Play Arlington. Which brings us to Empire Strikes Back, the second Star Wars movie, but the third arcade release. Released primarily as a conversion kit for the original Star Wars arcade, Empire is an awesome color vector arcade game that pushed that technology to the very brink. Though Empire is considered one of the best color vector arcade games ever, like its predecessor Star Wars, slowdowns during gameplay are notorious as the screen is forced to draw dozens and dozens of interactive elements while using relatively aged hardware. Empire expands on what worked in the original Star Wars arcade game, and as in Star Wars, the player takes on the role of Luke Skywalker in a set of familiar battle sequences in a first-person perspective. Specifically, the arcade features the Battle of Hoth and the subsequent escape of the Millennium Falcon through an asteroid field. Unfortunately, Empire Strikes Back was generally dismissed by the operators of the day, as most Star Wars arcade games, the original Star Wars, were still earning well in 1985 when Empire Strikes Back was released. Operators failed to see a good reason to invest in changing a game that was already doing well. As always, if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. Currently, Empire Strikes Back is available at Free Play Arlington as a special hidden bonus game, thanks to our friends at nearby Vector Labs Corporation. To activate the game, hold the left thumb button for about 3 seconds, then release it, then hold the right thumb button for about 3 seconds, then release it. That should start Empire Strikes Back. Join us in the next episode where we dive into a few of the more modern Star Wars offerings available at Free Play.